Hey everyone, this is installment 4 in your Chapter 5 review. You might notice this one looks a little bit different. I am struggling with some of the technology that I've got going on over here. We've run the gamut from garbled audio that sounds great for me but doesn't sound great as soon as I press play, to really good audio quality video but not synced up, so you're seeing things before you're hearing things, or the other way around. So this is version 3. And this will look a little bit different because, one, I've got this, obviously you can tell, in a Google Doc. And I'm going to attempt to actually write on this with my finger, so no promises about what the handwriting looks like, but this is apparently the only thing I can get to work at the moment, so we're just going to roll with it. Okay, section 5.4, we are graphing polynomial functions. There are a couple of things we want you to be able to do. First, we want you to be able to take your graphing calculator, if you have one, or Desmos, which I think by now you might find is actually a little bit easier, and actually type the equation in and graph the function. So that's the first thing. Once you have the graph, we want you to be able to look at the graph and find a couple of these interesting points. So first, the real zeros, those points where your graph intersects, touches, crosses the x-axis. And then finally, the x-coordinates of any max or min that the function might have. So we're going to look at a couple of functions today. The first, example 1 here, is a degree 3. And you can tell because we've got this 3 right here. So this is a cubic function. And that 3 tells us a couple of things. One, it tells us at most how many real zeros we're going to find. So I know going in that I will have at most 3 real zeros. And it also tells me roughly what the shape of my graph should look like. And so because it's a cubic, my graph is either going to go like this, 1, 2, 3, or it's going to go like this, 1, 2, 3. Now, how do I figure out which way it goes? Well, I look at the leading coefficient. The leading coefficient is positive, and so that means the end behavior of my graph needs to be headed in the positive direction like this one is. So my graph should look something like this because that end behavior as x approaches infinity is headed in the positive direction, like my leading coefficient is positive. Okay, so I'm going to jump over to Desmos. I'm going to graph this, and I'm going to find those key points. Okay, so here I am on Desmos, and I am going to type in my function. Y equals 2x cubed plus x squared minus 3x. So there's our function. And there's some dots at all these nice little points, the same shape that we were thinking that it should. And I'm going to zoom in a little bit so I can start to get an idea of these real zeros and all that stuff, and make later about what's going on. So there is a 0 here at -1.5. There's another 0 here at 0. And the third 0 is here at 1. So I'm going to actually write those down on my paper. So -1.5, 0, and 1. Those are my real zeros. And then I'm going to estimate the x-coordinates of any relative maxima or relative minima. So my relative max is right here at about, not much of an estimate, it's actually kind of nice. Relative max is at about -0.893. And then my relative min is down here at about 0.56. All right, now that I've got my graph done, I'm going to actually list my 3 real zeros. And hopefully you found the exact same zeros I did if you graphed this on your own, but my 3 real zeros were at -1.5, at 0, and the third one was at 1, 0. And I found a relative max at about negative 0.893. And my relative min at about positive 0.56. So there's my first equation. I'm actually going to scroll down now and do a second equation. So if I look quickly at this one, example 2 here, again, we're going to do the same thing with this that we did with the first one. This is degree 4. So that degree 4 tells me that there are at most 4 real zeros. And it's going to tell me that my graph is either shaped like this, 1, 2, 3, 4, or it's shaped like this, 1, 2, 3, 4. And I'm going to figure that out, that shape, the same way I did the first time. The leading coefficient for this is -1. It's negative. So that means the end behavior as I move to the right on my graph should be pointing in the negative direction, like this is. So my graph should look something like this. And now that I've got that information, I'm going to jump into Desmos. I'm going to type this equation in, and then I'll come back here and jot down what I found.
Okay, so I am back at Desmos. Still have our equation that we did just a second ago, so I'm going to delete this and type my new equation in. So y equals, or f of x equals negative x. Get to the toolbar, to the fourth, plus 2x squared minus 1. And so you can see already we've got that shape that we were anticipating. There are 2 real zeros, it looks like. So we have 1 here and 1 here at -1, 0, and at 1, 0. So I'm going to write those down right now. 2 real zeros. One of them is at -1. The other is at +1. We have 2 relative maximum, and those actually happen to be where the zeros are. So our 2 relative maxima are at -1 and +1 again. And we have 1 relative minimum right here at x equals 0. So I'm going to jot that down on my piece of paper. That's at x equals 0. And we are good with Desmos.
Okay, I found 2 zeros. So my 2 real zeros were located at -1, 0 and at 1, 0. My relative max, well, there were 2, and they happen to be exactly where my zeros were. So my 2 relative maxima were at -1 and +1. And my relative min was right in between those two at x equals 0. So there you go. Hopefully you can read my handwriting. I'm going to work on trying to get a stylus to try and make this look a little bit better, or better yet, try and figure out why the document camera isn't working the way that it was at the beginning of the week. But there you go. Hopefully that works for you. You have a couple of problems to try on your own. Tomorrow is your formative assessment. So if you have any questions at all, please make sure you send either Mr. Farquhar or I a question, or jump into that Google chat we've got with both classes. You guys might be able to help each other out. And that's it. Thanks, guys.